Hello there. My name is Cademan David, aka a man who really wants to play John Watson in a movie someday. And with my current facial hair situation, I'd be perfect. Nonetheless, you're watching the Sci-Fi Academia YouTube channel. Now, today we aren't actually really talking about something that's technically sci-fi. Though, depending on how far you stretch that, I guess it could be considered that way. But today we are talking about Enola Holmes #2. I just watched it, so I thought I'd make a video. Overall, this movie was pretty good. I actually liked it quite a bit. There was a lot of fun to have throughout the movie. I think even the problems I have with this movie sort of lean towards I'm not the target audience. So I can imagine for someone who is more of that target audience, this would be a pretty good movie. Because it mostly worked for me, and I'm not who the movie is made for. Now, real quick, I'm going to talk about some things I liked about the movie, and then I'm going to kind of jump into some things I didn't like about the movie. And then I'm going to talk about some things that maybe people might have issues with, but I personally do not. Right off the bat, I love a Sherlock Holmes story. Right off camera, I have 2 different Sherlock Holmes books on my bookshelf. So with that being said, I like Sherlock Holmes, and I love a Victorian-esque setting, so the setting here is really fun. I love also just a mystery, especially when it involves things like secret codes and stuff like that. I'm a fan of Henry Cavill's version of Sherlock Holmes. I liked it. It wasn't anything like the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock or the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock. It was kind of something else, and I sort of liked, I think too many things do the Sherlock version, which, if you read the books, there is a lot of the Sherlock version in there. In the original version of the character, I think a lot more so than people realize, but I feel like this version, has a lot of those traits, but kind of soften the edges. So yeah, all that being said, those are the main things that really worked for me, and it mostly comes down to the setting and my love of Sherlock Holmes as a character and as a concept. Mysteries, I like this genre. Now, some things I didn't like, it kind of felt like the Moriarty plot was tacked on to the end. It kind of just felt unnecessarily there. And another thing that I'm sort of trying to digest, because the movie, I literally finished it just a second ago. A lot of the men in the story seemed kind of useless.
You can hardly expect me to hit a girl.
Oh dear.
Not some... Ow!
Which, I kind of get what they're going for. It's sort of supposed to be like a sort of girl power-esque movie, right? The target audience is probably largely female. But I still feel like, you can portray men with a little bit more competence than this movie did.
Ow!
And I think that's fair to say. I mean, it's not a big issue I have with the movie, because like I said, I get that the movie is sort of trying to be like a girl power movie. And I don't really have a problem with that. I think the problem I have with sort of feminist type messaging in movies is actually when they make the opposite gender, they make men seem lesser.
Something a male-presenting Time Lord will never understand.
Just let it go.
Right? You don't you don't have to make men seem lesser to say that women are great, I guess. Now, this movie, especially in like sort of recent years, it's not as big of an issue in this movie as it is in many other movies that I've seen that have come out recently.
Just let it go.
I don't really have that big of a problem with it here. The thought was prominent enough in my head that I thought I should mention it in this particular review. So I think those are sort of my off-the-cuff things I didn't like about the movie. Another thing is this movie is very diverse for its setting, right? There's a lot of different races out and about, they're around. I don't hate this. I feel like this is the sort of movie where you can get away with that sort of historical inaccuracy, you know, where you want diversity, so you sort of take things and you say, well, we don't have to make it accurate because we want diversity in the movie. And because I think this movie doesn't necessarily take the time period stuff as seriously, right? I think, you know, there is this sort of movie where you do want the time period to look exactly how it would have at the time, and then there's other movies where the point of the movie, over being historically accurate, the point is to just have fun and, you know, make a little enjoyable story. Well, I'm sure a lot of people disagree, and I'm sure you could probably find YouTube videos complaining about the sort of diversity in this movie. It really didn't bother me. I really don't care. I think it's fine. I think it's fine. I don't think it's worth making a big deal about. However, I also don't think it's bad to want historical accuracy. I just don't think this is the movie to go to get historical accuracy anyway. You know, so I guess sort of the other side of that is that, like, people will say that you're racist if you don't want a historically not diverse setting to look, you know, not diverse when it's depicted in a movie. I think that's bad and wrong. You know, I think there's a lot of movies that does well to paint an accurate picture of, you know, the way people would have looked in that setting, right? So, you know, anyone who's watching this who's saying, oh, if you have a little bit of a problem with the different skin colors in a movie, then you're racist. No, just shut up, man.
Just shut up, shut up, shut up, shut it up.
You know, it's not about that, right? And a lot of, you know, maybe there's some people that when they complain about that sort of thing, it is just because they don't like people of, you know, different skin colors. But there's a lot of people that just want things to be depicted accurately, and that's fine.
Oh, well, that's all right then.
I apologize if I went on too much of a rant about that, but it is sort of a hot topic right now, so I wanted to throw in my 2 cents. Yeah, and then in the end of the movie, John Watson showed up, so, you know, I'm a big fan of Watson. As I mentioned, I hope to one day be Watson in a movie. Or a play. I'd be happy with a play too. So, one last thing I want to mention in this video is Enola, her mother says something to her where it's something along the lines of like, you know, when you come together with your allies, you actually get to be more yourself, and then your voice is louder than it could ever be on its own. Something like that. I don't remember the exact quote. But I think that is a valuable message where, a lot of times in life people try to be their own person just way too hard. And I think you need to realize that if you get the right people around you, they'll actually allow you to be more of the person that you should be. All that being said, that's all I have for today. But part of the reason I'm doing this video is because Amazon is releasing a new Sherlock Holmes series, which I plan to be doing videos on those episodes. So, if you subscribe to this channel, you'll get notified when I'm making videos on that. And automatic A+s to anyone who writes a comment talking about their thoughts on this movie, any of the things I mentioned, and also leaves a like. Thank you for watching, and live long and prosper.